Good morning, everyone. I think we'll begin. Today, the Republicans bring their budget plan to the floor of the United States Senate. While it correctly aims to balance the budget by the year 2002, it is deeply flawed and it is unacceptable. The Republican budget means older Americans pay more for health care, a lot more. It means kids in the middle class pay more for college loans, a lot more if they get them at all. It means working Americans with low income will suffer huge increases in taxes, and they will be taxed right back into poverty in many cases. It means sacrifices for American veterans, and they will be rewarded with more sacrifice, which is, in our view, completely unacceptable. Democrats will offer a number of amendments to reverse the wrong-headed priorities in the Republican budget. Amendments to make this budget smarter and fairer, restoring adequate funding for Medicare and education, repealing taxes on working families, each completely paid for, not adding one dime to the deficit. Both the Republican plan and our amendments balance the budget by the year 2002. Let me emphasize that one more time. This is not a debate about the glide path or when we achieve a balanced budget. Our debate is about priorities. Our debate is about fairness. Our debate is about the fundamental questions about where those priorities ought to lie in the next 7 years. The difference between the Democratic plan and the Republican plan is that our plan allows Americans to prosper beyond the year 2002. A budget is a statement of priorities. The Republican budget makes their priorities painfully clear. It tells seniors and veterans and kids and working people to take less so that we can give more to the wealthiest families and corporations in the country. It's short on vision, it's short on fairness, and it's short on common sense. As you can see, we have a number of our leaders in our caucus who are here to address a number of the specific amendments that we will offer as our alternative beginning this afternoon. Let me begin by calling on the ranking member of the Budget Committee, Jim Exton, for his remarks.
Mr. Leader, thank you very much. I'm going to be very, very brief, simply echo and try and emphasize the points that Senator Daschle has just made. We will be following on the Senate floor the same basic rules and guidelines that we enunciated very carefully and very distinctly in the budget markup. We will maintain the year 2002 to balance a budget. We will not raise taxes. We will not be making any significant changes in the goals enunciated by Senator Domenici. We will simply be offering amendments that will make changes in the priorities to make the budget fair for all Americans. We salute Senator Domenici for what he has done. We offer the hand of cooperation to make some changes basically by cutting the proposed tax cut benefiting primarily the wealthiest Americans in this country of ours, cut those down to give some priorities and to make significant reductions in the programs that we think Americans care about most: education, Medicare, Medicaid, and other programs that we will bring out in a whole series of amendments that we will do our best to explain as to their fairness, to their reasonableness, and hopefully come out of this eventually with appropriations bills and authorization bills that we can recommend that the President sign.
Thank you, Jim. The first amendment that we will be offering when the debate begins will deal with Medicare. Medicare, as you have heard us address in the last several weeks, is one of our greatest concerns. The largest share of the budget to be cut comes from Medicare. Two of the leaders who have had so much to do in recent years with regard to Medicare are here with us today, and let me call upon Frank Lautenberg and Jay Rockefeller to describe our amendment.
Thanks very much, Tom. Very simply, when the election was underway, Haley Barbour said, and I quote him here, that the outrage, as far as I'm concerned, is the Democrats' big lie that the contract with America would require huge Medicare cuts. He went on to say it would not. Now, I don't know whether Mr. Barbour believes that the proposed Senate cut of $256 billion is de minimis or insignificant, but it translates into a cost per two-person family, husband and wife, of $6,400 a year. It's quite significant when 75% of our senior population earn $25,000 or less. And Senator Daschle said it. The debate is not on whether or not we, the Democrats, want a balanced budget. We do. We do. It's a question of whose side are they on, whose side are we on. They are willing to lay down for the special interests, and we're standing up for the average person. That's the difference. We want to take $100 billion out of this expected fiscal dividend, which they stand firmly behind, and put that back into Medicare to reduce the pain that the senior citizens and also that those on Medicaid would have to endure. That's what we intend to do. I offered this amendment in committee on party lines. It was defeated. We're going to bring it up again. We want people to talk about it out in the glare of the public spotlight. Thanks very much.
It is, to me, really remarkable, stunning, depressing, outrageous, what the Republicans are suggesting in terms of Medicare, Medicaid too. The point is this: they are making cuts which would be absolutely devastating to the people and to the institutions that take care of people in West Virginia and all around the country. And we're not going to allow that to happen. I don't think the country's going to allow that to happen. And they just decide, well, we'll cut $250 billion to $300 billion out of Medicare. That's the largest cut in the history of Medicare. I mean, what were they thinking about when they did that? That means that the average person is paying $3,500 more, senior, between now and 2002, $900 more in the year 2002 alone. States like mine, where there are a lot of rural hospitals, are the ones that get really clobbered. My hospital people have told me that a substantial number of our hospitals will simply close. Not cut back services, because that they've already done. Close. No place to go for seniors. The new CBO director admitted in the Finance Committee this past week that there is no way that with these budget cuts that there can be anything but a reduction in services and a lessening of quality of services with the Republican cuts in Medicare. That is not what Democrats want to see happen. What is vile, I mean really vile about all of this, is that they pay for it because they want to do the tax cut for the rich. You know, and I know Republicans are associated with that. I know they want to keep that constituency. I know Bill Kristol said we don't have to do anything for the seniors because they don't do anything for us. But to show it in such crude terms, tax cut for the wealthy, and just savage seniors through Medicare, it's extraordinary, and it's something that we will not let happen.
Our second amendment will address education. As you know, there have been draconian cuts proposed in this year's budget for education, and to address our amendment, Senators Ted Kennedy and Tom Harkin.
I hope the American people take a very close look at this budget debate, because they'll see Democrats acting like Democrats and Republicans acting like Republicans. Our differences could not be more stark. This Republican budget is anti-elderly, anti-education, and anti-working to the families of this country, and it's all being done to bestow lavish tax breaks on the rich. Democrats intend to oppose it as vigorously as we can. The American people voted for change in 1994, but not this kind of change. Our Democratic priorities are clear, and the American people will see and hear in this debate who's on their side. Democrats support a balanced budget, but it has to be done fairly. Deep cuts in Medicare are unfair to senior citizens, and deep cuts in education are unfair to the schools and colleges and students across this country. The Republicans say that they are cutting education for America's children. Are Americans' children's interests served by having the largest education cuts in U.S. history? Are American children served by eliminating 33% of federal investment in education by the year 2002 based upon Congressional Budget Office estimates? Are Americans' children served by reducing Pell Grants by 40% by the year 2002? Are Americans' children served with the cuts for improving math and science skills that'll mean 2 million children by the year 2000 will not receive that kind of help and support? Will the 500,000 children that otherwise get Head Start be served with these kinds of cuts? Will the children of this country be served with the kind of draconian cuts that come to eliminate federal initiatives to develop and provide educational technologies for the classroom through collaboration with private funders at the time of we're moving into the information age? Clearly not. So I look forward to this debate. I hope we have the votes, but I know we have our priorities right, and I believe the American people share our priorities. I'm reminded about that wonderful teacher, Krista McAuliffe, who died in the Challenger accident. And just in an interview prior to the time that she took off, she said that she had touched the future. And someone asked her why she had touched the future and how she had touched the future, and she said, "I've taught children." We are not going to let this Republican budget go back on that pledge and that promise.
I'll just follow up on what Senator Kennedy said. The chairman of the House Budget Committee, Mr. Kasich, has said repeatedly that this budget that they're proposing and that Senator Domenici is proposing here is for the next generation. But in effect what they've done is they've taken a dagger to the next generation by pulling the rug out from underneath the young people of this country, and they're getting an education, as Senator Kennedy said. This budget is about priorities and common sense and nothing more. As everyone has said, we all agree on the bottom line. We agree on balancing the budget, but we do have a fundamental disagreement on how to get there. When it comes to the GOP's education proposal, Senator Kennedy said this is the largest education cut in history, and I think, quite frankly, the Republicans get an F on their report card for what they're suggesting in the way of education cuts. If they have their way, 1/3 of the federal investment in education, over $65 billion, will be cut from our nation's investment in affordable, quality education. And the Republicans say that they're not raising taxes. Well, that's another thing they say about their budget. They're saying they're being straightforward. They're not being straightforward. One of the biggest tax increases in history is in this budget of theirs, and it's levied on our students. And our students are going to find out about it. And I predict there's going to be a revolt on our campuses when they find out about this. Right now, under the Republicans' proposal, the Republicans are levying up to a $4,900 tax on 4 million American college students. In my own state of Iowa, 94,000 students could see up to a $4,900 increase in their student loans. That's nearly twice the undergraduate population at the University of Iowa, Iowa State University, and the University of Northern Iowa all combined. Now that is because, as you know, they're taking away the interest subsidy, making students, as soon as they get their loans when they're freshmen, start paying interest. When you add that up, that adds up, if you're borrowing the maximum, that adds up to about $4,900 extra that you as a student will have to pay simply to go to college. But they don't just stop with student loans. They go after Pell Grants, safe and drug-free schools, Title I, remedial education. And how about vocational and adult education? About job training? About getting our adults ready for the next generation, the information age? Senator Domenici says that they're cutting education by 30%. But if you look at what he's exempted out of those cuts and then apply the cuts to what's left, it's really a 60% cut in such important things as aid to students, disabled students. Do you know who's hit the hardest under the education cuts in Domenici's bill? And what irks me the most? If you're poor and disabled, you get hit the hardest. If you're poor, you get hit hard. But if you're poor and disabled, you get a 60% cut in your support for education. I find that extremely offensive. So again, along with Senator Kennedy, we'll be offering an amendment to restore at least $40 billion of this GOP cut in education. Restore our commitment. Mr. Kasich can say all he wants to about the next generation, but you can't have the next generation able to work and be productive unless you provide them a decent, affordable, quality education, and that's what we Democrats stand for.
For 12 million working families, a tax increase that is certainly likely to push them back on the welfare rolls in many cases. Here to discuss our amendment to reverse that are Senators John Breaux and Patty Murray.
One of the most unfair things in this budget is increasing the taxes on those at the bottom of the scale, those earning less than $28,000 a year. It's not fair and it's not right, and our amendment will return that EITC to those families at the bottom. I know what it's like to be one of the families at the bottom. Before I came here, I earned $23,000 a year. I had 2 children I was taking care of, and I had 2 parents, still do, who are sick and elderly. Those are the families that are going to be dramatically impacted by this budget. They will not have health care for their children if they're seriously ill because of the cuts to Medicaid. They won't have the opportunity to send their kids to colleges because of the education cuts. And if their parents are seriously ill, they're going to be burdened even more with paying out-of-pocket expenses for them as their Medicare costs are reduced. And in addition to that, we're going to increase their taxes. And that is not right, and it's not fair. I talk to young kids all the time, and they tell me that in this country what they worry about most is that their hope and their opportunity is being taken away. Our amendment will return some of that hope to our kids' eyes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Leader, for your effort in putting this organization together. How many times have all of you been in this room or at other press conferences where you've heard Republicans stand up and say that the key to welfare reform is work? So I asked a question. If that is their philosophy, why are they slashing and essentially terminating with a $21 billion cut the one most successful program that we have in this country that allows people to work as opposed to being on welfare? The Earned Income Tax Credit affects about 14 million Americans, 1 in 4 families in my state of Louisiana. And I want you to know that this is a program that is accomplishing the whole concept of welfare reform by allowing people to make work more attractive than being on welfare. This is a program that my predecessor, Russell Long, helped create in 1975. And listen to the bipartisan support this program has enjoyed that now the Republicans are trying to slash and burn. President Reagan called the Earned Income Tax Credit program, quote, the best anti-poverty, the best pro-family, the best job creation measure to come out of the Congress. Chairman Pete Domenici, when he wasn't chairman, said the Earned Income Tax Credit is a great way to help low-income families with the cost of raising their children. It sends assistance to those in need, to those who work hard and yet struggle to make a living and provide for their children. So the question that must be asked, why have a $1,400 tax increase for hard-working, lower-income Americans in order to pay for a massive tax reduction for families making up to $200,000 a year. Where are their priorities? And where is their sense of history? Because they were the ones who really thought this program was a wonderful program when it was first created. It's still a good program, and we're going to put the money back in it.
Another senator on the Finance Committee who has dedicated a good deal of his time to the issue of taxes, especially taxes for working families, is Senator Bradley, and he's here, and I'd call on him to address the EITC question as well.
Thank you very much, Tom. I think the distinguishing characteristic between the two parties is best demonstrated by the amendment that we're going to offer. There's a lot of rhetoric about who wants to help working families. Not families on welfare, but working families. People who work to support their children, who have difficulty paying the utility bills, can't pay for parochial school, can't think about sending their kids to college, but who dream of a better day and need a little help. What the Republicans are saying to these families under $28,000 in income is, you're going to pay more taxes. What Republicans are saying to nearly 300,000 working families in my state and Senator Lautenberg's state is that you're going to pay $1,500 more in tax a year. And then think about sending your kids to school, or paying utility bills, or moving up from a two-bedroom apartment to maybe a house on your own. Impossible. I believe this is a fundamental distinguishing difference between the two parties. We have worked hard to expand the Earned Income Tax Credit. From the time that John Breaux said, Russell Long put it in 1975, doubled in 1986 in the Tax Reform Act, expanded in 1990, expanded further in 1993. And you know what? If you give more tax relief to more people, it actually costs more money. But it's worth it to give more tax relief to working families. That's what we're trying to do. That's what we have done. That's what the Republican budget would rescind. The Republican budget would increase taxes on working families about $1,500 per working family. From our standpoint as Democrats, that shouldn't happen. From the standpoint of Republicans, let them justify increasing taxes $1,500 per working family, meanwhile giving it away to people over $200,000 in income. What is the moral justification of that? What is the policy justification of that? What is the economic justification of that? In short, there is none. It is the clearest division and distinction, and we intend to make it on the floor.
Medicare, education, taxes on the working people of this country are three of the major priorities that we will articulate and certainly debate with all that we can over the course of the debate on the budget resolution. There will be a number of other amendments, and we will address those at a later time. But these represent leadership priorities for which I believe there is a broad-based consensus in our Democratic caucus. Here to summarize our efforts and to lay the stage for the debate this afternoon is a very valued member of the Senate Democratic leadership, Byron Dorgan.
Thank you, Tom.
Let me make an important point. No one should despair about the disagreements we have on policy issues with respect to this budget. This is specifically the time and the place for these debates about priorities to occur. There's no debate about the destination. We want to put this country's fiscal policy on track. We want to move towards a balanced budget. We share that goal. But we have a very different view of the route to achieve that goal. And I suspect, looking around the room, that some might be skeptical that this represents a group of politicians from one side of the political aisle and the message therefore is skewed somehow. I'd like to read some comments from Kevin Phillips, author, Republican commentator, conservative, and let me read them to you, because this isn't Democrats talking. This is an analyst who's written a number of books on this subject who comes from the conservative side of the fence. Kevin Phillips says, anybody who thought the greed decade ended several years ago hasn't had the time to study the new balanced budget proposals put forward by the U.S. Senate and the U.S. House. It is special interest favoritism and income redistribution. Spending on government programs from Medicare and education to home heating oil assistance is to be reduced in ways that principally burden the poor and the middle class, while simultaneously taxes are to be cut in ways that predominantly benefit the top 1 or 2% of Americans. Again, not us, but Kevin Phillips, a conservative, writes, this is fiscal favoritism and finagling. He said, we would be talking about shared sacrifice with business, Wall Street, and the rich, the people who have the big money making the biggest sacrifice. Instead, he said, it's fiscal favoritism and finagling. Instead, it's senior citizens and the poor, the students, ordinary Americans, who will see programs they depend on gutted, while business, finance, and the richest 1 or 2%, far from making sacrifices, actually get new benefits and new tax reductions. Now, let me finish with his last paragraph, because it's a story that has not been well written in my judgment. In short, Kevin Phillips says, aid to dependent grandmothers, children, college students, and city dwellers is to be slashed, while aid to dependent corporations, stockbrokers, generals, and assorted James Bond imitators survives or even grows. And if the deficit is substantially reduced under a program like this, there will be a second stage of further upward income redistribution from upper bracket profits in the stock and bond markets. And if, he says, the U.S. budget deficit problem does represent the fiscal equivalent of war, and maybe it does, he says, then what we are really looking at is one of the most flagrant examples of war profiteering this century has seen, and it deserves to be rejected with outrage. Again, we support the goal. We want a balanced budget. We'll vote for a balanced budget. But we believe the priorities are fundamentally wrong, and we don't have to say it. Kevin Phillips and others have analyzed this budget and say it for us in a very eloquent way. This takes from those who don't have and gives to those who have. It is classic Republican economics, and we're going to offer amendments on the floor of the Senate to straighten it out and get back to a balanced budget the right way, the real way, investing in important priorities for this country's future.
I know you'd all like to hear from a few more senators this morning, but we're out. We're out for now, but you'll have an opportunity later to hear.
Letting them do the heavy lifting of balancing the budget, but grabbing the pot at the end of the rainbow to take back the good things. Why aren't they accurate in that, and why haven't you come up with actual cuts to pay for your other cuts?
Well, this certainly represents a cut. It represents a dramatic cut in the huge handout they want to give to the wealthy. We don't differ with the goal. We don't differ with the glide path, and we have performed a lot of heavy lifting over the last 5 years as we were in the majority. We've reduced the deficit by $1 trillion. The question now is, should we spend $170 billion on a tax cut for the wealthy, or should we spend it on Medicare recipients, education, and taxes on the working poor? That is the fundamental difference between Democrats and Republicans in this budget, and we want to reflect that. Elizabeth?
Why go after this tax cut that may or may not materialize? Why not go after some of the corporate aid that Kevin Phillips is talking?
Well, let me emphasize, first and foremost, because we so vehemently differ with the Republicans on the tax cut, since they are proclaiming that dividend to be there, we think first and foremost it's important we address that. There will be, as I said, other amendments and other opportunities to address other cuts and other issues. But as it relates to the first 3 priorities of Democrats as we take up this budget resolution, we make a clear distinction between our priorities and theirs. Ours are seniors, ours are students, ours are working families, theirs are large corporations and the wealthy.
So you may have other amendments.
That's correct.
Senator, virtually every one of these amendments was voted down on a party line vote in the Budget Committee. Where are you going to get the votes on the Senate floor?
Well, we now believe they've had some time to think about it. And we hope that really, in all sincerity, that when we get to the floor and we really talk about whether or not it ought to be a tax cut or a cut for senior citizens' benefits, that they'll make the right choice, that we have the opportunity to debate it more fully. Keep in mind, the Budget Committee debate was not much of a debate. there were very short time frames within which these issues could be discussed, and ultimately people voted on a party line without the benefit of a good discussion about the ramifications of each of these amendments. We won't have that limitation to that extent on the Senate floor, and we intend to use the opportunities that this resolution debate will present us.
Is weighing up Republicans?
Well, I think that there are some Republicans that are going to have to think long and hard about that choice, a choice between tax cuts for the wealthy and benefits for seniors, benefits for children, benefits for working families. John?
Do all of you endorse the presidential veto of the decisions?
I've not had the opportunity to talk to all of my colleagues, but I will say I've talked to enough of them to say that there's broad consensus that the president here is right.
Nobody in this group opposes it?
This is not a debate. That rescission vote is something that will come up. This is not a debate about priorities. We voted unanimously in the United States Senate for a rescissions package that provided over $16 billion in rescissions and saved cuts affecting 1 million kids. We had that package. They've cut out over 80% of it in conference. The president is right to call attention to it.
Senator Daschle, over on the House side, a group of Democrats led by Mr. Stenholm presented a budget that seems to be similar to what you're talking about through amending. Am I correct in that interpretation? And if so, why not just take all of these and present them as a budget alternative or one package?
Well, as I said, there are a lot of similarities between what the president has proposed and what the Republicans have proposed, but there are some very distinct differences. And it's our view that we need to call attention to those differences and use the offsets that we have available to us to ensure that we can really have a debate about priorities and not the budget itself. As virtually every senator has said, this is not a debate about the budget. It's not a debate about whether or not we get to a balanced budget. It's not a debate about the glide path. It's a debate about priorities.
Would you agree that your proposals are similar to what they're talking about, the Stenholm budget?
Yes. Yes, I would.
But why not then present this as just one package? I'm curious why the decision to do amendments instead of one budget alternative.
Well, Ken, I don't know if I could make it any clearer. Our view is to focus, is to call attention to what we consider to be fundamental differences in priorities. I think it's obfuscated if all we do is talk about an overall plan. We don't disagree with a balanced budget. We don't disagree with the glide path. We don't want to add $1 of additional deficit. What we want to do is debate priorities, not the budget itself.
Can I direct this to Senator Brooks?
Yes.
In the past, before the Republican takeover of Congress, you all tried to fashion a middle-of-the-road budget. You tried to get together with moderate Republicans and do something. Is there any such effort underway this time?
I would just say on a number of individual programs, we certainly indicated our willingness to work with them. Welfare reform is one of those. I think we've also called again for an honest effort in a bipartisan fashion to address the real problems with Medicare reform, which is health care reform. I can also report to you that we have not gotten any indication from any of them at any time of their willingness to now work with us. They did in the last Congress. They have not indicated that willingness in this Congress.
All right. Thank you. Thank you all very much.